Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Stephen Gilligan. I'm a psychologist here in California. I have been studying, working with, writing about the issues of creativity for many years. One of the main things that I do that I've developed and practice and teach is something called generative trance. Generative trance is not sort of your old time hypnosis. It's built on the work of Milton Erickson, which sees trance as natural and uniquely unfolding and based on the client's own experiences. And the generative trance work is sort of a next generation of that, which really emphasizes the relationship of what we call the conscious mind and the unconscious mind as the heart of creativity. And I really see how we need both of them in sort of positive forms. And when they're in good harmony, that's when the good stuff happens. So I want to explore that with you and show you a little demonstration. So you can especially see how the nature and the form and the function of a trance is shifting across a creative process depending on where you are. So we really want to let go of this idea as trance is this artificial sort of monolithic state in which you do programming to a natural creative state that is again organically shifting in every moment depending on where you are in a creativity process. So to talk about creativity, particularly trance, I always like to honor my Irish roots and start with a poem, because poetic languages and musical languages are really the heart and soul of the language of what we'll be calling the creative unconscious. Literality is important, but in many ways, it's a latecomer into the development of human language and human creative process. When we hear a good poem, we're sort of feeling the words flow through us, and we're curious about what places of resonance are touched, what sort of images get activated, feeling that we may have with that both implicitly and explicitly. And this is what we need to be doing for any creative process. So the poem I want to share with you, I think is a particularly apropos for exploring this notion of a creative trance. It's a poem by a German-American poet. Her name is Liesl Müller. She grew up in Germany, had to escape during the war, came here, I think, as an adolescent to the United States. She's a marvelous poet. And here she's talking about what I would describe as sort of the quantum-like, shimmering, holographic sea or ocean of consciousness that we call the creative unconscious. One of my favorite artists is Monet, and one of the things Monet is able to express is that sort of rippling field of shimmering consciousness, and when there's no clear figure ground that is solid, but rather the field is the major thing that you're experiencing. That's what's happening in trance. I'll talk a little bit more about why that is so important when we're stuck in a challenge or trying to create new territory in our lives. But let's start with the poem first. So she uses again this metaphor of a Monet painting to describe her late blooming generative trance consciousness. So here's what she says. Doctor, you say that there are no halos around the streetlights in Paris, and that what I see is an aberration caused by old age and affliction. But I tell you It has taken me all of my life to arrive at this vision of gas lamps as angels, to soften and blur and finally banish the edges that you regret that I don't see. To learn the line that I call the horizon doesn't exist, and sky and water, so long apart, are the same state of being. 54 years before I could see the ruined cathedrals is built of parallel shafts of sun. And now you want to restore my youthful errors, fixed notions of top and bottom, and the illusion of three-dimensional space. What can I say to convince you that the houses of parliament dissolve night after night to become the fluid dream of the times? It will not return to a universe of objects that don't know each other, as if islands were not the lost children of one great continent. The world is flux, and light becomes what it touches. Light becomes water, lilies on water, above and below water. Light becomes lilacs and mauve, and yellow and white and cerulean lamps. Small fists passing sunlight so quickly to one another that it would take a long streaming hair inside my brush to catch it. To paint the speed of light. Our weighted shapes, these verticals, burn to mix with air and changes our bones, our skin, our clothes to gases. Doctor, if only you could see how heaven pulls earth into its arms and how infinitely the heart expands to claim the world blue vapor without end. So, doctor, I refuse the operation. Beautiful, huh? So I want to talk a little bit about this creativity process, and I'm moving over here on the computer so I can open my screen share. And as I open my screen share, there we have it. I've got a few slides that I'm going to go through. As I say, I want to talk for about 25 minutes or so, and then we'll pause for a moment, and I'd like to demonstrate. I've got somebody who's been studying with me, Paul Whitcomb, and he's kindly agreed to be the demonstration person so we can explore, get a little taste of what this generative trance means. So how can we talk about generative trance as this method by which we can transform negativity, negative feelings, negative patterns, negative relationships, and also use it at least equally to create positive lives? That's the million-dollar question, huh? So these basic premises that we start with, it's all about creativity. When we're working with people, the core question, the core focus is, what do you want to create in your life? And in doing that, we emphasize that creativity is the heart and soul of all human consciousness, that everything that we know as reality, our reality, the reality of the world, we are very actively participating in creating that. Most of the time it's done mindlessly. Most of the time we're operating primarily off of conditioning from the past, but nonetheless, everything we experience as reality, we are not passive. It's not happening to us. We're actively creative participants in that process. So that's what we want to tap into in the process. If you don't like the reality you're experiencing, connect to your creative power and be able to change how you're creating your life to be able to experience more positive things. In this creative process, one of the really further tenets is for any experience, any event, you can make it a heaven, you can make it a hell. Every experience has equal capacity to be positive or to be negative, depending on how you connect with it, depending on how you engage with it. So again, that means that if we're working to help people make changes, if we're working to help communities make changes, it starts with connecting to this creative power at the core of all of your being. So with that as sort of a first level of premise, we then say, well, how exactly does that happen? How can we study it? How can we make use of this creative process? And here's where sort of the two core complementary minds that are referenced in hypnosis or trance work become really, really important. So we can say that reality is being created from a relationship or conversation between one mind or one type of consciousness that we call the creative unconscious, and then another type of consciousness that we can call the conscious mind. Those terms are generic terms that mean many, many, many possible things. So what I want to touch upon here is what the work means, the generative trance work means by those two terms. I'll be saying that in many ways they correspond to the two core human brains upstairs. For most of us, the right nonverbal brain. I'm saying that's the creative unconscious. That's where the deeper world is being created and held. And then over across the bridge of the corpus callosum, we have the analytical verbal brain, and that's where our managers live, who are using logic, linearity, and language to take the vision and explicate it, unfold it, to make it real in some particular way. And the idea, particularly in the generative version of trance, is that each of these minds needs the other. And when they're in conflict or when they're disconnected from each other, bad things happen. But when they are in harmony, when they have a relationship of mutual respect, that's when the really good things happen. So what we're looking to do to help a person create better realities in their life is we're having them connect first with one mind and the other mind, and then, most importantly, to have them experience and participate in sort of a 1 + 1 = 3, a sort of a we-ness, this emergent property that is the generative consciousness. And again, that's where all the good stuff happens. All right, so let's talk just a little bit about this notion of the creative unconscious, and then a little bit about this notion of the conscious mind, and then see how, again, when they're disconnected, that's where symptoms of persistent suffering happen. So in exploring this, It can be, I think, very helpful to think of really the prototype model of creativity that has been around for over 100 years. There was a fellow named Wallace, an American psychologist, 100 years ago, and he proposed this four-step model of creativity, and this model has been affirmed in many, 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 many different ways. So I think it's really, after 100 years, still sort of the prototype version of what happens in a creative process. And he says the first step is really what we would call the conscious mind. You pick a goal, you have a question, you make a commitment, and you work hard at it. There's no substitute for hard work and focus and effort. So it's not just you go into trance and everybody lives happily ever after. But the first step of creativity is a declaration of this is what I want, and a commitment to give your full effort to do that. As you give your full effort, invariably in any sort of challenging task, you hit the wall at some point. You hit the place of diminishing returns at some point. Nothing's working. You feel stuck. You feel frustrated, etc., etc., etc. You start finding yourself saying, "I don't know," which was Milton Erickson's favorite term, by the way. What do creative people do when they hit the "I don't know" place? They do nothing. They let go and go into what Wallace would call the incubation, or the rest, or the letting go, or the emptying out. For many people, they're afraid to do this. They're too anxious to do this. They're too caught up in anxiety to do this. But this is where natural trance really comes into play. So the conscious mind is, let's do it, effort, try. You have really sort of a narrow beam. You're really using what you think is the case. And then you find that's not working. I don't know what to do. In the creative process, you let go. This could be, I take a nap, I go for a walk, I play with the kids, I read a book, I do my meditation, I go for a swim, whatever. You take a step back, you let go of trying to do it, and you sink back to what we'll be calling the creative unconscious, sort of a shimmering, open presence where you're aware, but you're not really trying, or you don't have a fixed understanding about what you should be doing. So it's called the incubation. So it's like taking the seed and putting it inside the egg and just sitting on it, resting on it. I usually recommend to do that for at least 3 days when you really feel stuck. During that time, what the creativity researchers generally agree upon is one of the most important things is you're letting go of all your wrong answers. You're letting go of it should be like this, or I have to do it this way. And that fixation and reiteration of very tense patterns that don't fit the needs of the situation, that's what keeps you stuck. So let it go. That's the beginning of trance. If you're lucky, and if you wait long enough and have patience, and if you have a little bit of skill in the area, and if you've already given it a lot of thought, chances are at some point, step 3, the illumination, the light bulb goes off, the aha experience. When you ask people, where did that new idea come from? I don't know, or it came out of the blue, but it didn't come from here. It came from what we'll be talking about as the creative unconscious. that hasn't really changed anything. It's opened a new context. It's opened a new awareness. Step 4, you step back into the world and you work out all the details. We have a saying in English, the devil is in the details. In other words, it can be a lot. So that's 4 steps, but really in the process of these 2 minds, conscious and unconscious, it's really 2 steps. You have what I'll be calling the flashlight consciousness, conscious focus, effort, commitment. And then you have what I'll be calling the lantern consciousness, this wide, diffuse, yin-like, open curiosity. Creative development is a rhythm between those 2 minds. So let's talk a little bit more. You could see, by the way, on the right, that's a little snippet of a Monet painting. So when we talk about the creative unconscious, I think probably the best way to think about it from the neuroscience of people like Carl Pribram or the quantum physics work by David Bohm is to think of it as a sort of a shimmering ocean. The space that it is unified and it has enfolded into it everything, not only about yourself, but about the world. So sometimes this is a little bit of a challenging idea. I'm deeply convinced after 45 years of studying the science and the philosophy and the work and the psychology that this is really the best way of thinking about the creative unconscious. It's a connection to the totality, unbroken wholeness of the world. So it's diffuse like a Monet painting or like a meditative state or like this open imagination. So your sense of this self-awareness that's clear and sharp and is able to act is a little bit more diffuse. So it has the value of I'm connected to the unity of the world, not only my history, the history of my ancestors, even the history of the planet, for that matter. It's all here. It's all here. There's no figure ground focus. As soon as you say, well, I'm going to focus on this, then this sort of more fuzzy, shimmering image that could be represented this way or that way, it sharpens. And now you're coming out of a primary connection to that Monet painting or to that quantum field or to that shimmering open presence of the creative unconscious. So figure that this is your home. This is your connection to life. So when you need to do something integrated, when you need to do something whole, these are the roots that you're drawing from. So again, it has the string of a feeling of connection to all of life. But its weakness from a traditional human point of view is you don't get much done from that place because you haven't focused on one particular goal or one particular focus. That's the job of the conscious mind. And by the way, I was mentioning, alluding to at the beginning, this creative unconscious mind, this is the right brain. This is the nonverbal brain. Ian McGilchrist, the Oxford neuroscientist, who I think is really one of the most important researchers in this area, says the experience of this brain, the experience of the nonverbal consciousness, this experience of the creative unconscious is something that he calls presencing. So again, like you were just contemplatively sitting in nature, you feel present and you feel the presence of all of life. So it's not a one step removed. It's not a human being that experiences, well, there's nature over there, and then there's me over here, and me is there to dominate it. I'm a part of the wholeness of life, and I have an experience through presencing of the unity of the world. So that's a shared experience. I'm presencing what you're presencing, and the way that you know it is unique to you. The way that I know it is unique to me. So on the one hand, it's a shared reality, a common world that we share. On the other hand, each of us has our own experience of it, our own take, our own perspective, our own unique way of experiencing and expressing it. So we have the multiplicity and the unity of life that are at one in the presencing of the creative unconscious. So when you don't know, when you're stuck, when what you're doing or thinking isn't working, jump back into the ocean. That's the first level of generative trance. As I said, when you're just swimming in the ocean, it can be a little bit like a vacation. It's great, but you're not getting any work done. So to get that work done, we need this second brain, this second mind, which is more of the flashlight consciousness of the conscious mind of the verbal mind. So here we're thinking based on muscle tension. Our breathing is more inhibited. We have a very narrow band focus. In the foveal vision, we're only sampling 1 degree of a 360-degree field. In that foveal vision, which McGilchrist says is really more of the predator orientation, you're sort of tuning in, locking in on the target. Everything becomes very sharp, but now this pattern that could be experienced in 10,000 different ways gets reduced to one particular map or one particular understanding. So this allows you to take action. It allows you to make a choice. It allows you to select one particular viewpoint and one particular goal, and then act to be able to realize it. Okay? Very, 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 very important. So its strength is also its weakness. There's this sense of singling out one thing among the infinite possibilities, allows you to take action, allows you to put yourself out in the world in a certain way, that allows you to have this continual focus on something. But it's very easy to lose the forest for the tree. So in a harmonious, healthy, sustainable, creative mode, you're going back and forth between them. It's sort of like your camera lens is focusing in, and then it's defocusing and feeling the wider peripheral. And creativity is surfing that middle way, if you will. So what usually happens is we get stuck in that muscle tension conscious mind. And one other thing I want to say about that is this is a really unique human skill. And it has distinguished human beings, and in the virtual blink of an eye that human beings have been on the planet, look at what's happened. The cities, the beautiful things, the communities, the art, but the wars, the environmental collapse, the suffering, the degrading of the planet. So what happens, what at the heart of the conscious mind is it leaves the present moment of time and space and is no longer in the now. It no longer is in the living world. It goes away into a virtual world, which we could call a ghost world, and it imagines something that doesn't exist. What if we had this, or what if we think of a deity, or what if we think of a country, or what if we think of a group that unifies us all together? And these things don't really exist in living consciousness. They're virtual representations that human beings are making. So it allows these incredible, uniquely human developments, but often at great, great cost. I think the design was supposed to be that we leave the present moment, we create these possible virtual realities, we explore them, then we say, oh, that's a good map. Now let's come back into the present moment, to our connection to ourselves and our connection to all of life. And now let's see how we can bring a new possibility into the living world. What's happened, I suspect, because we're basically 2-year-olds with this skill, is we go away from the present moment and we stay disconnected. So we go into our ghost world and we get locked in it, and we're no longer connected to our bodies, to each other, to the planet, etc., etc., etc. So McGilchrist, while he called the experience of the right brain, the nonverbal brain, presencing, he calls the experience of the left brain, the analytical brain, a representational system. So you're going into this muscle contraction created virtual space, and it's not connected to the presence of the living world. Again, if you have a way to keep coming back to relaxing, coming back to letting go, coming back to connection, to something bigger than yourself, community, connection with nature, generally that's not a big problem. What we see increasingly is we get stuck inside of our virtual reality. We get stuck inside of our conscious mind. We're trying really hard to make things happen, to force something to happen, to run away, to be worried about, to get angry at other people for not cooperating. And this is keeping us more and more and more locked in this dissociated state of the conscious. So we can see that then as a sort of a model for how problems not only develop, which is not really our concern as therapists or coaches, we're really called into a person's life when the problems persist, when the suffering won't go away. There's nothing you can do about the fact that sometimes life is difficult, sometimes you fail, sometimes you're suffering a lot. But as long as, like a young child, you're in it, and then the cloud bursts, and then the sun comes back out, it's not really a problem. Where we're called into is when you're repeating or stucking or maintaining the same distressed state of negativity over and over and over. So the simple way to think about that is we have this need or desire. This is something I want. And we, in order to think, okay, this is something I have to create, we tense, we lock, we go into flashlight consciousness. We're no longer connected to the unity of life. And we try to make that happen. Sometimes it's a simple task, we can do it. But often we fail. It doesn't quite work. Usually, and this is where the big problem starts to happen, we try harder. They say, oh, I didn't do it hard enough. I have to force it, or I have to do it again, again, again. And each time we do it, we're repeating the same pattern. So this is where we're trying to fix our problem with the very same means by which we created our problem. So this is where people say the problem becomes the attempted solution becomes the problem. What you're trying to do to change is usually the main thing that is responsible for you not being able to change, because you're tense and because the map that you have that you're holding does not fit the needs of the situation. Nothing personal, doesn't mean you're stupid, doesn't mean you're bad, means you're a human being. Okay? So in order to solve these problems, and this begins to give us a sense of what we're doing in the work, particularly with generative trance, first thing is let go. We have a saying in English: if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. To realize whatever you try, whatever you're thinking, whatever you're doing, when you're in a stuck state, it will just dig your hole deeper. If you can get an appreciation of that, if you can help your clients get an appreciation of that, that's half the battle right there. So this is where what we call the step 2 creativity. So my effort, I focus on it, I give it my best shot, I hit the wall, tells me time to rest, time to let go. Okay. So that's one of the first things that we're doing to create change in a generative trance session, is we're having a person go into a state, what Milton Erickson called his definition of therapeutic trance: not knowing, not doing. And there's a skill to that. Some clients need support. They're afraid if I let go of my defenses, I'll get swallowed up, by something terrible. So it's a skill in terms of how to support a person to learn that they can positively surrender to their deepest resources, which is their inner consciousness. Once we have that general presence in state, I'm here, I'm open, I'm calm, I'm relaxed, that's the first level of trance. Then we need a second level, which is all the dynamics, all the parts of whatever person is trying to do. We have to, like ingredients of a meal, like the soup is now, the broth of the soup is now simmering. We've got to take these ingredients and begin to stir them in. 3 basic ones, in addition to that, what we would call the coach state or the generative trance state, is the intention, the obstacles, the thing that's blocking the expression of the intention, and the resources needed to put a person into a sustainable creative state so that they can engage with these obstacles and challenges and transform them into resources that are part of the healing path. So you gotta let go into the Monet painting, go into your open meditation, find a way to bring each of these core elements, intention, resources, obstacles, into your soup without dissociating or disconnecting. So it's a really skillful attention process. And then you're stirring it, because these different parts, the intention, the resource, the obstacles, they have to be woven into a single mandala, a single painting, a single song. Each musician in the orchestra has to be playing the same music. Each teammate on the sports team to be working in harmony with each other. Each part of your creative process have to be in harmony. What trance really allows you to do is release the grip and the lock on each of these parts. So you could see, well, it could be this, or it could be, because you might think, well, I need safety. And in this process, you think safety means I have to keep people 20 feet away from me. And my way to do that is to scream at them and yell at them so nobody wants to come close to me. That's one way to experience safety. Maybe that was the best way when you were younger. Then you realize, well, it's creating more problems than it solves. You know, I feel lonely, I feel unheard, etc., etc., etc. But I've got in my conscious mind, I've got in this sort of flashlight consciousness, safety means yell and distant. So when I take that need for safety and drop it into the shimmering, simmering ocean of the unconscious, that begins to release. And safety could mean hugging somebody. Safety could mean talking to somebody. Safety could mean needing distance and withdrawing and having my alone time. This is where Erickson got his core hypnotherapy dictum. He used to say, people come to see you because they're rigid. That in the area of the struggle, they've got a very rigid understanding of this part of their experience. Your job is to help them get unrigid. The way to do that is through this core idea. You can experience X in many, many, many different ways. X might be safety. X might be connection. X might be positive confidence. In the conscious mind, you sort of collapse into one meaning. If that works, great. If it doesn't, back to the drawing board, back into the ocean. And then to find new meanings and then to integrate them into everything else that's happening in that part of your life. Once you integrate, then you still have the step 4 of the creativity process. But remember, hard work, let go into incubation, wait for the miracle, and then work out the details. You still have to carry it into everyday life. So in the demo, I especially want to be emphasizing there are these 2 levels of regenerative trance. One is just the open presence, not knowing, not doing, feeling all is okay. I don't have to do anything to change. I don't have to understand anything here. Open presence. And then the second is, let's take the core pieces of the intention and slowly weave them and fold them into the trance. Okay.